welcome action fans, and thanks for joining us for this somewhat impromptu episode of All 90s Action All the Time. Impromptu, you say? I saw your thing on Twitter. I saw you tweet out about this episode. Of course you were going to cover Batman Forever in your Val Kilmer season. Yes, you would be correct, listener. Of course we were going to cover Batman Forever in our Val Kilmer season. It was basically the jewel of our season. It's basically the reason this season was created. However, it is impromptu because this is our second recording of this episode. I should mention, I'm your host Scott Murphy, and I was moving from Scotland to New Zealand. So all of the Val Kilmer season was recorded in August, before I moved here to New Zealand in September. However, part of the audio of that episode was lost. So we are now in November and we have to re-record the Batman Forever episode. Unfortunately, not all the participants of the original recording could make this episode. No, my co-host, Craig Draheim, who was in the original recording, and maybe one day I'll just put out the audio of the opening 40 minutes and closing 40 minutes of that episode with the missing half an hour. Just, maybe I'll put it up, and you can listen to what remains of that episode. Particularly if we set up a Patreon, if people are into that. But he couldn't make it for the re-record. However, our special guest on that episode, Mr. Caleb Knutson, he is back. Back for Batman Forever 2, again, Electric Boogaloo, all that stuff. Hey, Caleb.
Hey, we never actually met, but your name was on the hiring slip. I have it. And yes, I did use the same intro for the original recording for this one, because I love that quote from this movie so much.
I'm sure we'll reuse other jokes.
I'm pretty sure Craig is actually off tailoring my new Robin armored suit, so that's why he's not here today.
That's true. That's true. He's busy tinkering away with that.
Yeah.
For Christmas. I think that's going to be your Christmas from Craig. Yeah.
It's so that I can get my armored butt shot in while getting dressed for this podcast.
Oh dear. Oh man. Oh, please let that happen on your YouTube.
Oh yes.
So, as I said, we are here to talk about Batman Forever. So, as always in the podcast, I give some stats on the movie, when the what's and wherefores of the film. So, Batman Forever was released on June the 16th, 1995. It was directed by Joel Schumacher, who also directed such cult hits as Lost Boys and Falling Down, and would also go on to direct Batman and Robin. It was written by Akiva Goldsman, who had previously worked with Schumacher on The Client, and would go on to win an Oscar for A Beautiful Mind, somewhat bafflingly. It was also written by Lee and Janet Scott Batchelor, who don't have that many kind of big movie credits, but their only real other big movie credit is the Paul W.S. Anderson film Pompeii. Critically, Batman Forever is currently sitting at a 5.4 out of 10 on IMDb, 38% on Rotten Tomatoes, based on 68 reviews, 51 on Metacritic based on 23 reviews, which I think more kind of properly gives an idea of the kind of mixed reviews that it received at the time. It wasn't like a wholly negative response. And it has a 2.4 on Letterboxd. So, even if you are repeating from the original recording, tell us a little bit about your relationship with the movie Batman Forever.
Well, Batman Forever is really my first real experience in realizing that the movie theater is one awesome place to go to be entertained and to just look forward to going to. I had previously gone to see probably like a couple of Disney movies like Aladdin and Lion King before this. But I remember in 1995 looking at all of the promotion and like reading news articles and hearing about, Robin's going to be in the movie, and Robin was so important to me. I just love Robin. But yeah, going to the theater, this was the first movie that made me realize, like, oh my God, movie theater is awesome. And going to go see movies is a great thing to do. So the reason why I have this YouTube channel, the reason why I'm here talking with you is really because of this movie.
Wow. So it really is a kind of pivotal film in your life.
I mean, and also, I'm not going to go into my history with Batman because that would just take up, 5 hours. But Batman is my favorite character in all of literature and film. So there's that too. But yeah, this was the movie that started the whole loving of movies.
Sweet. That's real cool. And yes, I think generally, I mean, obviously we're going to be talking about Batman, and often when you talk about Batman, you end up talking about other films or other media with Batman, whether it be the comics or the cartoons or whatever it may be. So we might touch on some of that, but we will try to refrain from touching too much on that because Batman is also my favorite comic book character, has been since I was a kid. I've read several Batman comics, graphic novels. Was a big fan of Batman, the animated series and the movies. And so, yes, that episode would be like 7 hours long, and I think people might get exhausted with them.
Oh, yes. Oh, yes. And plus everything over at DC Comics is all just surrounded by Batman. They should just call it Batman Comics. So I don't know of one person that does not like Batman. So
yeah, well,
and of course, now that I've said that, you will get comments on this podcast like, I don't like Batman. Hey, did you hear? Hey guys, I don't like Batman. Did you see my comment?
Yeah, no, there'll be people. There'll be people. There'll be people who are like purely Marvel people, where it's like Batman sucks. I'm all about Spider-Man.
I only like Marvel. I will cut off that whole other comic book side because I'm only Marvel. And the same thing the other way. I only do DC. Doesn't make it sense. We could do it all.
Yeah. Yeah, I know. It's weird. It's like I'm such a 90s kid, but I'm like, it's like you can listen to Nirvana and Pearl Jam or Oasis and Blur. It's fine. It's fine. It doesn't have to be. Not everything has to be a war. It doesn't have to be black and white. It's all out there equally for everyone to consume the same way. I mean, here's our wrestling reference. If you're in the 90s, yeah. WCW and WWF at the time. So there you go. You could watch them both. Well, I guess technically no, because they were both on Monday night at the same time. You could watch them on alternate
on commercial breaks. Yes.
If you wanted to, 1 week you could watch Raw, and the next week you could watch Nitro. This is very 90s.
Well,
very
there you go.
Because not.
Yeah.
Yeah, very much not everybody. You don't have to choose. You could. I mean, at the time you could have watched ECW as well, and that's fine. It's okay.
Until they align together to try to take down Vince McMahon, right?
Yeah.
Boy, we're getting really off topic here. This is Batman.
We're getting
this is Batman forever.
We're getting mad off topic. It's yes. But yeah, I mean, now don't bother with WWE. After that Saudi Arabia deal, whatever. Don't bother with them. It's going downhill anyway. Just watch AEW. That's much better, to be honest.
Plus, no one works for WWE anymore. Everyone's getting fired.
But
that's the last. That's it.
They're either jumping ship to AEW or they're just getting fired. It's a mad time in wrestling. But this is not a wrestling podcast.
It's
We're
not.
getting up.
I'm sorry. We went down the wrong way, but Batman Forever, one of my favorite movies, actually. And I know that this movie, especially with its connection to Batman and Robin, tends to have not the best overall consensus of it being good. But God, this is when we go to the '90s Batman, including Batman '89. With that, this is my favorite out of all four of them. Because I loved everything, the aesthetic about it, and all of that. What about you, Scott?
I'm not sure I would say it's my favorite out of the four of them, but it is a curious film in terms of, I suppose it's the first Batman I remember coming out of the cinema. Now, so it came out in '95, so I would be not quite 10 when it came out. So I was slightly too young to remember. It's weird because I don't really remember like Batman Returns coming out of the cinema. I remember like Batman Returns when it came out on video, because obviously, like particularly in that time, things, I mean, their minds will be blown by this, but back when I was a kid, video, VHS, which is a technology some people might not be aware of, they basically came out like a year after the movie. It wasn't like now where, it gets released on streaming or Blu-ray like 4 months after the film's in cinemas or whatever. So I remember it being in the video store, but I don't remember it coming out at the cinema. So, because like 92, what would that be in 92? It'd probably come out in summer, I guess. So I wouldn't be quite 7. I wouldn't, so I don't remember that. So this is the first one I remember like properly being like aware of, like the big marketing drive being at the cinema and stuff like that. Which that kind of makes it the first Batman, I'm aware of coming out on the big screen, so like that I had anticipation for, because by that stage I'd already seen like the original and like the animated series, so it's the first Batman I remember being like excited for. And also, like, I was a big Jim Carrey fan because, like, I'd seen like Ace Ventura and I'd seen The Mask as well. I loved The Mask. So I was all over this movie. I was like, yes. I was excited for it. And it lived up to my expectation at the time. Like, as a kid, I totally loved this movie. I did not see the flaws in the same ways I would come to see in my teenage years or now. So this was a big film for me and my Batman fandom as well. For sure.
And that's probably a big push because this was Warner Brothers' kind of makeup for Batman Returns. Batman Returns came out and it was popular, but parents did not like it for their young kids because of all of the kind of dark imagery. In some scenes, there were flat out gore. And they would protest the Batman toys for McDonald's and the Happy Meals and advertising for that. So that's kind of why this movie kind of shifted a little bit. And they were like, hey, Tim Burton, you don't want to direct another Batman movie. Let's, you don't want to. You do something else. So let's get this other guy, Schumacher, in to make it a little bit more colorful, a little bit more kid friendly, so that we could start marketing with McDonald's and start marketing toys and advertisements. So,
yeah, it's a very curious. I think, I suppose I'm biased. I grew up at the time, but I do think it's a curious time in pop culture, like that time, the early '90s into the mid '90s, because in the kind of late '80s and very early '90s, there was a brief period where things were really quite violent, and
Yes, there
And
were.
also, you had a lot of like kids' cartoons that were connected to very adult franchises. So you had like a Conan cartoon and a Toxic Avenger cartoon and a
Yep.
RoboCop cartoon and all these kind of things. And then kids would be like, "Oh, I love this cartoon. I wonder what else is connected to it. Oh, RoboCop. I want to watch RoboCop."
Yeah.
And then parents being like, "Holy shit! Actually, what are my kids watching?" And then there being a big pushback against that. And then like
Yep.
as you get into the kind of into the mid '90s, yeah, as you get further into the 90s, things become kind of super kid friendly. Like companies go right against that, and it's like
Yep.
things get really watered down as compared to what they were in the 80s and very early 90s.
Yeah, I remember one more kind of not really off topic, but one example of that was if you watch the original 1990s Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles film, those turtles are using their weapons the entire time. But then, as you're talking about with parents kind of looking at all this violence that these kids are watching, Power Rangers is coming out and all that stuff,
Mm.
everything's so violent that when the second Ninja Turtles movie came out, The Secret of the Ooze, those turtles never use their weapons. The only one that ever does is Donatello with his little staff bow thing. But
That's
Leonardo
right.
never uses his swords, Raph never uses his sais, and Michelangelo never uses his nunchucks. I think he has like hot dogs on strings or whatever.
He does. Yeah,
Yeah.
it's like a kind of yeah, like a roll of sausages.
Hmm.
In the second one. Yeah, that was like a big thing in the UK as well. Like particularly the nunchucks. People seem to be like I remember as a kid, like, it was like, like nunchucks. Like I can't remember if that's when nunchucks became illegal, but like but it
Legal.
was like
Oh,
it was a big thing in the UK as well. Where it's
wow.
like
You guys are putting on laws of nunchucks and we still have gun problems over here. Wow. You have laws on nunchucks. And wow, not to get political over here, but Joe Schmo, who had like a 16 on his IQ test, can go to Walmart and buy a 9 millimeter.
yeah.
Awesome. I love this country.
Okay. Yeah, yeah. I just remember like nunchucks being in the pit. I can't remember if they were actually made illegal in the UK, but like I just remember it being like in the papers. It was like this real kind of moral scare of like there's going to be kids in the streets marauding the streets with nunchucks, and we need to
Oh
get
my, oh no.
nunchucks away from our children.
And really, when you looked at it, it was like if they're going to be, beating up anyone, it's going to be themselves from trying to learn how to use it.
Yeah, it'd just be like
Oh.
a lot of broken noses of.
Yeah. But all of that is kind of all part of how what made Batman Forever kind of popular was the taking away the darkness that Tim Burton kind of put to Batman or went like extreme with in Batman Returns. And Schumacher lightened it up here with a bunch of neon lights and colorful villains. So this one was definitely more marketable.
For sure. Although, so we'll actually get into the movie now, listener. You'd be surprised to learn. I'm sure we'll venture back into tangent corner at some point, but like we'll actually get into the meat of the movie. However, you say that the movie does have something of a kind of schizophrenic tone throughout, and the very opening scene after the flashy 3D credits really kind of gets to the heart of that
Mm-hmm.
because you have this scene of Val Kilmer very moodily and very in a very badass way suiting up as Batman, and then we cut to him going to the car and Alfred being like, would you like a sandwich with that, sir? And him saying, no, I'll get drive-through. And so like at the exact same time as it's being kind of like moody and broody, and then it just finishes on a gag, and that kind of happens throughout the movie. of just being like, we're colorful and we're wacky, and also we're deep and dark and psychological, and we're not quite
And
sure what's going on.
I remember seeing that scene in the theater and kind of, even back then, kind of tilting my head going like, oh, that's weird for Batman to say, because I remember seeing that part in McDonald's commercials. Like they were selling, actually, I'm drinking out of my Robin McDonald's cup from Batman Forever right now. But they were selling, Happy Meals in these cups. And I remember that part of Michael Goff's Alfred saying, can I persuade you to take a sandwich with you, sir? And seeing that in the movie, I was like, oh, okay, cool, interesting. And what do you think of Michael Goff as Alfred, kind of just in general? I had recently watched Batman and Robin, just kind of thinking about him, like, God, he was the Alfred that I grew up with, and I like Michael Caine, and I'm sure Andy Serkis is going to be great in the Batman next year, but
Sure.
Michael Goff is always going to be that Alfred for me.
Michael Goff, yeah, this is an interesting thing. Like, if you put a gun to my head and said like, what's your favorite Batman movie? I'd say like The Dark Knight is definitely The Dark Knight.
Yeah.
But like if you did the same thing and said, what's your favorite Alfred? Yeah. Like like Michael Goff like made such an impression on me as a kid
Yeah.
that like he'll always be Alfred to me. And like that kind of very dry, very kind of deadpan kind of, because he does that throughout, even the quote unquote darker Barton ones. He is quite quippy, and he's quite he has like this kind of dry, laconic sense of humor, and he has this kind of like eye roll type thing to him, where he's just kind of like, yeah, whatever. I don't know. Yeah, he just is, having seen like Michael Caine's Alfred and Jeremy Irons' Alfred, and like I'm sure Andy Serkis will, like you say, would be great, because I like all three of those actors, and I like them at, like I like two of those ones as Alfred. I've not obviously seen Andy Serkis as Alfred yet,
Of course.
but yeah, but I
It
think
always,
he just really took the role and made it his own, and I don't think I'll ever really see anybody else as Alfred. Even like, even because I'd seen the '60s Batman as well, and yeah, he'll always be Alfred to me. Michael.
I liked this version of Alfred because he was always fully behind the Batman project. Like there was never a moment where he was like, nope, like what are you doing? Which is, you get great scenes like in The Dark Knight or Batman Begins, or hell, even with Jeremy Irons and Batman v Superman, of him being like, oh well, you're kind of overstepping your bounds, or you're kind of going too far, or you need to take a rest. Michael Goff in all four of these movies is kind of always there, being like, we're behind this project here. This Batman thing is a good thing for you.
Yeah, I think like kind of comparing and contrasting, there's like it's a different relationship, I think. Like Jeremy Irons and Michael Caine are almost like a stern father trying to point their son in the right direction. Whereas Michael Goff is a kind of kindly grandfather who kind of ruffles his hair and then goes, "You little scamp, here's a sandwich." Like it's a different relationship.
Yeah, kind of just like that. Yeah, that grandpa who's always like, "Yeah, let's do this thing behind your dad's back."
Exactly.
Because your father won't allow it, but I will. Yeah, I like that. Yeah, but yeah, so Batman gets his sandwich and he's going off to the Bank of Gotham, or Gotham Bank, because it's the second anniversary of the second time Batman captured the villainous Two-Face, played by Tommy Lee Jones of the Fugitive fame at this time, I guess.
Yeah, I can't remember if he won the Oscar, but he was certainly like nominated, and like this is when kind of Tommy Lee Jones was like a big deal, like because obviously he'd been acting for a long time, but I think The Fugitive was like his real kind of major, like, oh, Tommy Lee Jones is in like the big leagues now, and then obviously this film and then Men in Black really cemented that, of like him kind of being kind of more A-list.
Yeah. And you'll listener, you will hear me kind of throughout this podcast, because the big thing about Batman Forever, at least nowadays in social media, the social media sphere, is that there is this crying out for the Schumacher cut, the director cut, the hidden director cut of this movie. The whole release the blank cut made popular by the Snyder cut movement over the last several years, and finally getting that version of Justice League early on in 2021. But here I actually have the film comic adaptation of Batman Forever that actually does follow the Schumacher cut, or at least the kind of the plot outline of what that movie would have looked like. So kind of Schumacher cut alert here. This movie was actually not supposed to start the way that all of us have seen it, with this whole bank heist with Batman confronting Two-Face. The movie was actually supposed to start later on with our introduction to Edward Nygma and Bruce Wayne meeting him, which we'll talk about here in a couple minutes. But already, right off here, the bat, we have kind of studio interference. Hey, let's make this cleaner. Let's make this more action-y, action-packed, and let's get Batman doing action-y things to kind of get everyone into this movie right away.
Yeah, and as much as I'm intrigued to see, obviously, the Schumacher cut, if the Schumacher cut's released, but I do like this opening, because it's just like you really just hit the ground running. You get right into this action sequence, and there's some fun beats in the action sequence that, again, kind of sets the tone of what this movie is. I mean, obviously, the Schumacher cut seems like it has a slightly different tone, but, you get Batman, after a lift is being shot up, an elevator, sorry for our American listeners, is being shot up by a bunch of goons. He obviously isn't in the elevator, he jumps out, he has this swinging kick, and then he's beating up the bad guys, and then there is a series of what I can only say are comedy electrocutions with full kind of sound effects.
Yep. It's one of those moments in the theater, even as a kid, I was like, why are they making the sound? But okay, funny, let's go.
It is kind of even as a kid, you're like, oh, that's you recognize that as something that's kind of silly and cartoony. Yeah.
Yeah, and it's as this movie goes along with this opening battle, the fight scene with those sound effects and the neon lights of Gotham, which is totally different from what we saw in Tim Burton's Batman Returns, and hell, even the Batman '89 film, where everything is very gothic. We have a lot of blacks and we have a lot of whites and a lot of, just kind of in between gray colors. Here, there is oranges, there's yellows, there's purples, there's greens. It's like whoever was mayor of Gotham at the time was like, I want everything neon, folks. No more of this Tim Burton Gotham stuff. But and all of that is kind of setting the tone of this is like a perfect melding of the 1960s Batman TV series with Adam West, Burt Ward, when Jim Carrey comes in a couple of minutes with his kind of Frank Gorshin-like performance of the Riddler. It's a perfect melding of that style with the Tim Burton style and the aesthetic of the Batman suit and kind of the Gotham aesthetic of these big statue-like buildings. So with those cartoonish sound effects, I'm getting the sense that, okay, we're combining things here. We're combining styles, and I like it.
We definitely are combining things. And yeah. I do think we mentioned this on the first time we recorded this, and I think it is worth mentioning again. Bank guard who gets stuffed in a safe by Two-Face has some of the worst line readings in the movie. Like, his acting is terrible. Like, when he says, "Oh no, it's boiling acid." It's like, what?
Hey, that's my hearing aid.
It's like, I get that, like, some of the actors were probably directed to kind of, like, ham it up, it's kind of comical tone, like, we want, this is what we're kind of going for. But this guy took that ball and really ran with it in the worst way.
When you're an actor, you go full out, and it's the director's job to say, okay, pull it back a little bit. And if the director never does that, you keep going. So, hey, he has, you're right, the worst line readings of this entire movie. You remember them, though.
You do remember them. They stick in your head.
Hey, my shoes are melting. No more.
Yeah. What else do you remember? And this is the strange thing, right? Because, like, Tommy Lee Jones is known to be a serious guy, even though he's had several wacky performances in his career, especially at this time before this, like, because his villain in Under Siege, as we talked about on this podcast, is hilariously over the top. It's only kind of later on that he does, like, loads of westerns and becomes, like, kind of very serious, like Men in Black Tommy Lee Jones, which I think, from what I've heard, is closer to his actual personality in real life. And throughout the movie, apparently throughout the filming of the film, he really famously did not get on with Jim Carrey. And famously said to Jim Carrey that he would not sanction his buffoonery. However, Tommy Lee Jones has plenty of his own buffoonery, because the other thing that has always stuck out in my mind from this opening sequence and the kind of first half of the movie is Tommy Lee Jones's hilarious reactions every time Batman evades death. Like, his hilariously over the top, like, oh, God.
Yeah, so happy day. Yeah, and another thing of, like, the Schumacher cut, at least according to this comic book adaptation that I have, a lot of his lines were cut for this movie, and there are deleted scenes out there that you can watch on YouTube, or if you have the Blu-ray or DVD, the special features there, where they have the dialogue of Tommy Lee Jones's Two-Face, and he is very, I want to kind of compare him to kind of Shakespeare. He's very eloquent in what he is saying and how he is saying it, and he's almost speaking in prose, where it feels like it is two people talking, where it's one part is the serious side and then the other part is the crazy side, kind of giving us the sense of, hey, this Two-Face guy is not just Two-Face by name. He does have actually two different psyches and two different people that are coming to the forefront in his brain. However, with this movie, we got to cut it down to 2 hours. So a lot of the stuff that you hear is just kind of cut out, and you end up with just those crazy, wacky reactions. And it gets, I don't want to say it gets worse. It just gets more even amplified once this Two-Face character meets up with the Riddler later on. So it's interesting that you say that, and that Tommy Lee Jones hated working with Jim Carrey, yet Jim Carrey doing his Jim Carrey thing later on in the movie kind of fed into Tommy Lee Jones kind of acting like Jim Carrey throughout this movie, or at least trying to.
I think,
they're flying. Oh.
Yeah, no, I do think, like, that is just one of those things, though, that, like, Tommy Lee Jones, I suppose Tommy Lee Jones was just like, I'm not going to let this bastard steal my limelight, so, like, if you can't beat them, join them kind of thing. I think maybe that's kind of what happened.
Yeah, I definitely see him doing that. That makes sense.
But then again, even here, he's kind of, like, wacky and stuff. And, like, mind you, some of his line readings are great. Like, I love, when they're in the helicopter and just before it's about to crash into the Gotham Statue of Liberty, where just before he jumps off in a parachute, he has that great quippy line of, like, at least have the good taste to die.
Right. That's a great line. And he jumps out, and he already has his parachute that is beautifully embroidered with yin yang, representing the Two-Face character. I mentioned it in our first recording of this movie, and I'll say it again. Who is Two-Face's tailor? Because he has two sides of everything. Every
That is
suit,
true.
every house that he lives in, every car, his parachute, everything is split in two. And I'm like, who's your designer? Who's your interior decorator?
That is true. He's got very skilled people working for him. Not
Yeah.
like, not any of the people you see working for him on screen, but off screen,
No.
very skilled mechanics and interior decorators and tailors. Like yeah, very very skilled workforce.
Yeah.
You just don't see them on screen. They're all working behind the scenes.
Yep.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And then I was going to mention as well, because like one of the complaints of this movie has always been it's even at the time it's ropey CGI, and like after that, like just as we before we go on to Wayne HQ, we do get this kind of this shot that kind of goes through the city that is like that seems to be like a kind of CGI kind of city that's it's like yeah there's a lot of ropey CGI in this movie.
Yeah, the dam, it's like a crane shot going through, and the news reporter is talking over. Yeah, early stages, but it's improving over the years.
Yeah, I mean, like to be fair, the CGI in this movie is not as bad as the CGI we covered in Escape from LA, and it's not as bad as Spawn either. So
Oh God.
points on that.
Oh yeah. No, not at all. And hell, even with Batman and Robin a couple of years later, the CGI in there, it's actually not terrible. Some of it is, but the majority of it, I'm like, it's not bad, not that bad from what I remember. But yeah, this whole scene of us cutting to Wayne Tech, where Bruce Wayne comes in to kind of oversee everything. We get our first introduction of Jim Carrey's Edward Nygma. This was part of the Schumacher cut again. This was actually supposed to be the very first scene of this movie, so we just get the introduction of these people without the masks on, or at least the rubber masks on at first. And then when Bruce Wayne goes to his desk and says, lock, desk, and chair, and he goes through the tube and he's talking with Alfred, getting the suit ready, that was him getting ready to go off to Two-Face. So this scene was actually supposed to open this movie. But of course, we talked about it before, we wanted to start with some action, so we switched things around here. But I do love this introduction of Jim Carrey as Edward Nygma. He's that lovable fanboy who is just obsessed with Bruce Wayne and will do anything to talk to him and to get him to buy in on his investment of Enigma technology and his focus on brain waves.
And I just remembered something I said in the first recording that I definitely want to say again.
Oh, okay.
Yes. Do you think Guy Pearce watched this film before he put in preparation for Iron Man 3? Because this scene, I feel, is so similar to the scene that happens at the beginning of Iron Man 3.
Absolutely, 100%. And then, actually, that Iron Man 3 was 2013. If you go even 1 year later with the amazing Spider-Man 2 and the amazing performance of Jamie Foxx as Electro, who we are going to be seeing here in a couple of weeks, with the Spider-Man No Way Home film. He has the same thing where he's obsessed with Spider-Man. Yeah. It's did Jim Carrey lay the blueprint for this type of villain, for this type of character?
I'm not sure, but he might have.
You think comic book films? I'm like this. People kind of give him a little crap for him being over the top and being too Jim Carrey-ish. But so many people have emulated him over the last several decades in comic book films. Kind of also makes sense because Jon Favreau is in this scene as an assistant.
Yes, he is very briefly in this scene.
I think I learned that earlier this year. I was like, what? That's Jon Favreau. Huh.
There are some weird cameos in this movie. It's like, or like people that are like, who, from other stuff, or like, or become more known or whatever. Mm-hmm. But this is definitely one of them. Jon Favreau turning up, weird, right? Because I mean, I suppose this is I can't remember. This might have come out in the same year as Swingers, so like I can never remember if Swingers is 95 or 96.
I think it was 96. I think it was the year after.
Okay, okay, all right.
I mean, around the same time.
So
So
Favre hadn't made his breakthrough yet.
yeah. What are you talking about? He made his breakthrough here in a
It's
Batman
this
movie.
was the beginning, man. This was the beginning.
Yeah.
So yeah, I wanted to talk about. I've kind of after that, like, there's a scene with like Chase Meridian, who is played by Nicole Kidman, who is entirely kind of thrown away in this movie. She's completely wasted, basically. 'Cause she really isn't given that much. However, there is a kind of odd thing that happens, kind of almost directly after this, where, or maybe not quite directly after this, but certainly they're again talking of the schizophrenic tone of this movie. The relationship between Chase and Batman really kind of changes throughout the movie. So in the kind of second half of the movie, or even before the second hour of the movie, it becomes this thing of like she's with Batman and Bruce, and it's all about kind of psychology, or it's all about exploring his scarred psyche and all this kind of this thing and his repressed memories, and it's supposed to be kind of taken seriously, and it's supposed to be the grounded portion of the movie,
Right.
for the most part, for almost like, but in this opening segment of the movie, it is not at all. And it is very confusing as a watcher, for the way the relationship changes, because basically in the opening act of the movie, this relationship is like Katharine Hepburn, Cary Grant in a screwball comedy, just wacky, kind of spitting one-liners at each other. Where he's like, "It's a car, isn't it? Chicks dig the car," and and she's like, like, "Come over, like, I'll bring the wine, and you bring your scarred psyche," and it's all these kind of zingy lines, and then suddenly it's not, and you're like, what?
Yeah, this is the maybe this is the attempt of like, hey, yeah, we are marketing this film, or at least trying to get more kids to buy our merchandise, but here's some adult content for the parents who are bringing their kids to the theater. So let's put Nicole Kidman in some lingerie and turn the bat signal on, and hopefully turn some more of Batman on. But yeah, this whole relationship is, again, with the taking of the Schumacher cut, is taking away from this duality of this movie, because we have two characters here. Two-Face, that is the literal representation of having two different personalities literally on his skin. You look at him and you go, oh, that's two different people. But we also have Bruce Wayne and Batman here, or at least Bruce Wayne dealing with the facts that he is, or at least feels like he's being pulled in two different directions. He's being pulled as Bruce Wayne to be just Bruce Wayne, the billionaire playboy, but there's also this Batman project that he is working on, trying to save Gotham, and he's being pulled between the two. With these two different people, there is the one, Two-Face, that seems pretty, even though he's crazy, seems kind of in sync with his duality, whereas Batman, who seems to be a little bit more grounded, is actually fighting with himself more. And that's what this relationship with Nicole Kidman's Chase Meridian is supposed to do. It's supposed to help him figure that out, or maybe pull him more towards the light. But with time constraints, trying to get this thing in under 2 hours, we just kind of lose all of that. We just do the whole, hey, Nicole Kidman, you are pretty gorgeous. Let's just put you on screen because you are. And there we go.
But I suppose I was also trying to get to the fact that the tone of both Nicole, like I say, Nicole Kidman's kind of wasted. She isn't given much because it's so stripped back and stuff. Like, maybe she kind of looks bored throughout the movie, and I don't know, maybe in the Schumacher cut with the extra stuff, like maybe it comes off better. but basically Val Kilmer's performance up until the point they go for the date at the circus is a different performance to the point after, because a lot of his line readings in that opening part of the movie is basically he's doing kind of the thing that he does in Top Secret, where he does like funny lines, but he reads them in a totally serious way, which makes them more funny. And it's like it's a real kind of comic performance. Basically, up until after the first meeting at the psychiatrist's office, like after he knocks down the comically giant door and like he's still doing the comic performance. Post that point, his performance becomes like broody and like, you know, all kind of tortured psyche. And like he has some funny lines, but he's not doing the kind of parodic performance that he's doing in the kind of opening half hour of so it's I basically think he does two different performances in the opening half hour and the you know, preceding hour and a half. There's two totally different performances there for me.
Yeah, and I think I had always attributed to having Bruce see the death of the Graysons in the circus, and to kind of taking in Dick Grayson to be that kind of shift for him. It kind of sounds like you're feeling it actually just before the circus. To me, I always felt it after, and that's when he becomes brooding and he starts talking about the red book, the diary that was lost. So, I mean, it's just to have him kind of start revisiting the death of his parents again, which, gosh, everyone just loves talking about in Batman films, and of how sick they are of it. There's so many podcasts of reviews on Batman Begins and Batman v Superman, and hell, even this movie and Batman '89. I'm like, I'm tired of seeing the pearls drop. I don't want to see the pearls anymore. Stop giving us the origin story. And I'm like, this is Batman. You got to give us the reason why Batman is going here.
Yeah. I get it. I get it for sure.
Yeah. But yeah, he knocks over the the comically large apartment door or office door, wherever she's living there, and invites her to the circus. And we also have our little cut-in scene of Enigma killing his boss and figuring out that his brainwaves machine works, because that's to quote this movie, that's the technical term, brainwaves, right?
Brainwaves, yeah, it's brainwaves.
It's scientific.
It's the scientific term. This film's very keen on scientific terms.
Yeah.
So like, and yes, I suppose we should mention that a little bit, because like this is one of the scenes that always stuck out to me and has always been emblazoned in my mind since I was a kid, since I first saw it. Like, you know, I suppose I've seen this movie a bunch of times, but one of the scenes that I can always recall, you know, even if I like forget other scenes, is like Jim Carrey's song and dance number, when he's testing out the invention, you know, he's, you know, sucking out your brain waves. You know, like...
doing a big and yep. It's always stood out to me too. Really, anything that Jim Carrey did in these early '90s years, it was just embedded into my brain. So yeah, if he's doing Jim Carrey, yep, I'm paying attention. But we also get the kind of serious side of Enigma and how sick of a person he is with how he kills his boss. He's just figuring out it works, and then just shocks him out the window and says, "Red babe, you're fired," or should I say terminated?
Yes, he's a stone cold killer now.
Yeah.
Which is, again, something of a turn, like, because he, you know, in that opening scene, he doesn't seem like, he seems mad, but he doesn't seem like he would be quite so au fait with like just bumping somebody off like that. That he, you know, this initial kill might have been more of a struggle for him. But nope, we just get straight into him being a supervillain. So that's all.
He's the villain. That's right. This is a comic book movie, and he needs to be. And we did two villains in Batman Returns, so we need to do two villains in this movie at least.
Yeah. Do you know what? Talking about things that stood out to me as a kid, another thing that stood out to me as a kid is when Two-Face enters the circus and like takes over and starts
Yeah.
shooting the place up and stuff like that. And he's like, one of you pasty-faced fools has to be Batman, it's probably one of you in the crowd or whatever. Um, I can't remember the exact line, but it's something like that. And then Val Kilmer tries to say, "I'm Batman," and but he can't. Nobody can hear him. Even though I feel like two things that stood out to me actually. I always feel like the people sitting next to him should hear him. So I always feel like Chase Meridian should find out that he's Batman in this scene, not later on in the movie. The other thing is, like, he is Bruce Wayne goes down to the ground floor and is kung fu fighting gang members in the center circle of the circus. And yet, and I know there's a lot of chaos, nobody, and I mean nobody, spots this and thinks like, hey, Bruce Wayne is really good at kung fu. Like, that's weird. I wonder if he's Batman. Like, even as a kid, I questioned the logic of this. I was like, what, nobody sees him doing this? He has fought off like 5 gang members with kung fu skills. But something that's, I believe, has never been reported on Bruce Wayne, billionaire playboy.
And not even just that, he also rappels in, like he kind of climbs the scaffolding, takes out the guys on the big drums that they're banging, and then he swings in and takes out and starts doing the kung fu stuff. So it's like, come on, guys. Yeah, even as a kid, I remember that moment when he stood up and said, "Harvey, I am Batman." And I'm like, dude, no, what are you doing? You don't do that. You're Bruce Wayne. You don't reveal your true identity.
Exactly.
Yeah. But I also love the circus scene, because this is what I was waiting for. I was waiting like my entire life up to this moment to see Robin on the big screen, and here he is. He's Dick Grayson of the Flying Graysons, and when you see him in the kind of circus getup of the Robin costume that we will see, it puts a smile on my face, and I get excited. This is. Finally, I'm seeing Robin. I love Robin.
I don't know. I think you've mentioned on previous podcasts, on not the original recording. I'm not referring to the original recording of this podcast that nobody's obviously heard. But like on other editions of podcasts you've been on, such as Backdraft and Executive Decision and other things, where Batman and wrestling always seem to come up. Anyway,
Yep.
you mentioned you're a big fan of Robin, and this is kind of where we diverge, because I think we talked about it in the Three Musketeers episode. I was not particularly enamored as a child with Chris O'Donnell. However, you were a much bigger fan.
And I think I was a fan because he was Robin.
Yeah, sure.
In my older years, seeing his performance and techniques of an actor, there's not much there. You're right. But for me, it was always just that iconic image of seeing okay, I'm being told this is Robin. So yeah, that's awesome. And this is really cool. And probably the most beautiful thing that's always stuck in my mind is the ending of this circus scene of his family, his brother and his parents on the circus orchestra floor. No blood, which was interesting. They just fell from the top of the circus tent, so there should be blood spattered everywhere, but it's a kid's movie. And just peering up and seeing the silhouette of this seemingly small kid, this teenager, looking down at the end of his family. And I always just loved that imagery. And for me, it's always silhouette. You can always appeal to me by doing any type of silhouette like that. But yeah, I love that imagery.
It's funny the things you question logic-wise as a kid, because I question the logic of nobody seeing Val fighting people on the circus floor, even as a kid. And yet I never questioned the logic of the Grayson family falling from a great height and there being no blood. Probably because I had already seen like other Batman films, and I'd seen like James Bond films that are good for that, and like watched like things like the A-Team and stuff like that, where people get blown up, shot to bits, no blood, like. So I'd seen that enough that I'd never questioned the logic of that. I've just been like, oh yeah, that's what happens in the movies.
Kids so desensitized. Yep.
Just violent things happen, and nothing really much happens.
But then, so his family dies, and Police Commissioner Gordon, played by the amazing Pat Hingle, I believe is his name.
Yeah,
yep, Pat Hingle,
yeah.
Comes to Wayne Manor and says, "Hey, Bruce, we need you to take him in because he's got nobody." And even just watching it recently for this podcast, I go, what about him says that he is not 18 and he can take care of himself legally as an adult? Why does someone have to take him in?
This is an interesting thing. So, looking up on IMDb, Chris O'Donnell was born in 1970. So even if this film was filmed in 1994, he would be 24. And he looks it. He looks exactly his age. He doesn't look older than his age. He just looks exactly his age. So he looks like a man of, like, whether it was filmed in 95 or whether it was filmed in 94. So he's around the age of 24, 25. And that's kind of what he looks. And yeah, it's very confusing. Because you're like, I mean, the state doesn't need to take care of him. He is clearly an adult by any standard.
and they try to make him appear younger by making him seem shorter than Val Kilmer, even like as Robin with Batman and also as Dick with Bruce. They kind of bring him down and bring him shorter. I don't know if they put Val Kilmer on a platform. I know for some of the promotional posters, when it was just Batman and Robin kind of standing like back to back, they have Batman more on a pedestal to make him appear taller. So I don't know if they were trying to make him appear younger, but just looking at him like, no, he is not under 18. He can write off and do whatever he wants. I don't know why he needs to be here. But I do love Michael Goff's Alfred trying to persuade him to stay after Bruce is showing him all the motorcycles and like, hey, look how cool it is to be here. And Michael Goff comes in and he's like, oh, well, I have this sandwich and milk, but I'll just give it to the dogs. Maybe they're hungry.
And it's like, I mean, it's not just a sandwich. It's like a full, like, it's like fries and like Aberdeen Angus steak burger, like.
It's elegant drive-through, actually, is what he got.
What's that?
No, he got elegant drive-through. Yeah, it's awesome. Oh. When it got drive-through.
When it got drive-through.
Yeah.
From one of the many, many fast food chains that you have.
Yep. We love it here in America.
In the UK. Although I found out, this is a very brief tangent. We'll get back to the movie very, very soon. It's weird how like different American franchises land in different places because like obviously the obvious ones are in the UK, like like McDonald's and KFC and Burger King and stuff like that. And then like in the last few years we've got kind of other ones like Krispy Kreme's opened and stuff like that in the UK, like within like the last kind of 5 years or whatever. But coming to New Zealand has Wendy's, and that doesn't exist in the UK.
Oh,
and I was like, oh, okay.
Your first experience with Wendy's, interesting.
I've not tried it yet. I've not tried it yet. I don't know if Wendy's is any good or anything. But yeah,
it was pretty terrible. Like a year ago when I tried it, we just tried it again actually recently.
Okay.
And I was like, okay, maybe it was just a bad batch last year, but The fries this time, okay, they were pretty good. Interesting.
Okay. Okay.
Wendy's is a little hit and miss. So, well, at least here in the States, I don't know what it is in New Zealand, but
I don't know. Haven't tried it, but like I was just amused that like yeah, different American franchises just pop up in different places in the world. I also like the last thing on American franchises. I remember within the last kind of 3 or 4 years, I had like a couple of American friends who were like, when Taco Bell opened in Glasgow, they were like, we should definitely go to Taco Bell. And I was like, is it any good? And they were like, no, but it's Taco Bell. You know, like, you gotta go to Taco Bell. And I'm like, what, why? If it's not that good? And it's just like, yeah, but it's Taco Bell. And I'm like, yeah, stop saying that. Like, what was going on?
No, because that's what we do here. It's not good in the States, but it's Taco Bell. It's open late. It's really cheap, so you do it.
Yeah, but yes, that's what everybody says about Taco Bell. It's so confusing to me. I've been like, yeah, it's you know.
Plus they're gonna win the franchise wars in a couple of years. So.
Oh yeah, okay. Oh, yeah, that's right. Yeah, based on the prophecies of Demolition Man, which will all come true.
Like half of them already have. So
yeah. A bunch of them have. So all of them obviously will follow after.
Yeah. So Dick is now living at Wayne Manor and is telling Alfred the story about how he saved his brother from a loose wire and is showing him the Robin helmet, and which always confused me looking at that Robin helmet. I love the story and I love the reasoning behind it. Like, he flew out like a Robin to save his brother. That's why he has the nickname of Robin. But looking at that helmet, I'm like, that is not a robin. I live in Michigan, and our state bird is the robin. That's a cardinal. That is not a robin on that helmet.
Well, that's true, because like I'm not an ornithologist. I don't know loads about birds. However, I have watched American football, and on the helmets of the Arizona Cardinals, it's the exact same bird. So
it's a red bird. A cardinal is a red bird. The robin is gray and then has like an orange belly, whatever the technical bird term is. I don't know.
Yeah, because you can get a red robin. You get a red robin, but it's just like on their chest. It's basically
yeah. That part always bugged me. I'm like, that is not a robin. It's a cardinal. But fine. I love the story and the reasoning why we call him Robin. But then after this, we get to the introduction of Two-Face to Riddler, where we get to see Tommy Lee Jones' first deal with Jim Carrey, and we again get to see the interior decorating. We get to see sugar and spice because he needs to have two women to satisfy both sides of his brain. One side is all white and angelic, and the other side is all devilishly evil and spicy and red meaty.
Yeah. Do you know what? Something I hadn't questioned up until this point, even the first time we recorded this. So, like, like a few months back, I rewatched this movie in August. And now, and we recorded an episode on it. Didn't think about it, and we're recording an episode on it, I guess. So, like, I've seen this movie several times, and obviously Sugar and Spice, the whole concept of Sugar and Spice is, one is, angelic and conservative, and, like, everything's very sweet and light and fluffy, and it's, the meal she serves him is like a healthy meal, and, the meal that Spice serves him is like is just basically just meat, just lots of meat, and then and like alcohol and more meat, and and all this kind of stuff, and it's all heavy metal and stuff. They both give him a cigarette, and I was like, that seems. Yep,
and one is like a standard cigarette, and then the other one is like this black coated one.
Yeah, exactly. But it's like why would Sugar give him a cigarette? Surely that's like everything else kind of is in line. Everything's soft and fluffy and nice and pretty and healthy. But they both give him a cigarette. I suppose it's just for that image of him having two cigarettes in his mouth. But like, I was like, that doesn't actually make any sense. It's
Well,
just something I picked up on this time watching it.
well, and we didn't get those truth commercials until like the early 2000s. Like smoking was still okay in the 90s.
That is very true. That is very true. Smoking was banned in pubs in the UK in 2006. So yeah,
There you
that's
go. Yeah, and I think we followed kind of a couple of years after that, but yeah, in the 90s, no, smoking was still cool.
no,
So
yeah,
for him to do it twice, yeah.
yeah. Smoking still cool in the 90s.
Yeah. Yeah. I also love when the Riddler shows up. I've read articles of Jim Carrey just practicing in the mirror with his cane twirling. He would just twirl that thing so much that he could just do whatever he wanted on set. But I also love this costuming. One, because it's a great representation of Frank Gorshin's Riddler from the 60s television show. But I also love how it stays with the theme of if you wear a mask over your eyes, you always need to paint the blackness around your eyes. Whether you're Batman, whether you're Robin, or here you're the Riddler with this little domino mask, the little black around his eyes is makeup. It's just black paint that you need to apply yourself as the person. It's something that's always bugged me about Batman movies, of how it's like Batman always has the makeup underneath his eyelids. And it's something that I love about the trailers for the Batman movie that's coming out next year, is that they show him taking off his cowl and he still has the black circles around his eyes like Nicolas Cage did in Kick-Ass. I'm like, yes, thank you. I know it's there. And here, Jim Carrey is still continuing it with the aesthetic.
Yeah, for sure. I don't know, like, yes, it would be fun to have those kind of cutscenes as they carefully apply the makeup around their eyes, because that's always funny. It's a bit like if you see like kind of. I know this will be my last wrestling reference. The like behind the scenes of like WrestleMania and stuff, and you see like the Undertaker, this giant man, like carefully applying the makeup around his eyes, you know, kind of black eyeliner, you know, like it's just
dyeing his goatee.
Yeah, because you think, you know, because you think, oh, it's a big corporation, probably they've got makeup people to do that. Nope, no, they don't. No. You know, I think the Legion of Doom applied their own face makeup. You know, it's not.
Yep. I think they're all the makeup artists are only there for the women wrestlers. I don't think they're there for the guys.
No, not at all.
No. And actually, before we kind of just to reference back, we actually missed a car chase scene with the Batmobile and Two-Face's little goons, because after Dick comes to Wayne Manor, we start getting flashbacks of Bruce remembering the death of his parents, and he starts seeing this little red book on a desk, and that's part of his flashback. And this plays into a Schumacher cut situation here towards the end of the movie, but just wanted to bring it up. And do you remember anything or do you want to talk at all about the Batmobile chase? What do you think of the Batmobile design at all?
I always quite liked the Batmobile design in this movie.
It's one of my favorite designs. I think it was one of like the most popular ones. I believe I saw the Batmobile like on the Drew Carey show. I don't know if you had that in Scotland, but it's like this. It's kind of representing of like the ectoskeleton of a bat, where you kind of see the insides of the engine and the car and the vehicle. So I always liked this one. Now
in Scotland, I don't remember. Drew, when I was a kid, the only thing I remember that I knew Drew Carey from was he was that guy who hosted Whose Line Is It Anyway?
Right. Yeah, exactly. Exactly. Now, Schumacher cut alert. The Batmobile chase scene originally was not supposed to happen here after the circus and after the death of the Graysons. This car chase scene was supposed to happen after the lingerie scene with the bat signal with Chase Meridian and Batman, after he jumps off and gets into his car and says, "Huh, women," and drives off. Then this was supposed to lead into the Two-Face car chase scene. But again, Schumacher cut and studio interference. We're cutting and pasting and putting this later on at this point.
So yeah, I think like that makes sense. It makes sense that I think the having that scene at that point in the movie actually makes more sense because this scene, this car chase scene, seems kind of plonked in. Like it makes narratively it makes more sense to be like he jumps in the car and then like this happens. Whereas
Right.
yeah, it just kind of comes out of left field that sequence before we get the meeting with Two-Face and the Riddler. I mean, it's a fun sequence, and again, I enjoy Tommy Lee Jones's over-the-top reaction of like, "Oh, Batman's not dead," even though I used this, when he fires the bazooka at him and then like misses the Batmobile because the Batmobile has weird sidey tire powers. So. Yeah, but it does kind of come out of nowhere because, and I think again it kind of ties into that thing of there's a lot of moments in this movie that feel like tonally jarring because we've had this like emotional beat of Bruce Wayne makes this Freudian slip of when he says I killed them instead of he killed them. And then we have this heart-to-heart with Alfred and Robin, and then we just kind of jump into this car chase sequence, and it just feels very jarring and shuddering and kind of like, oh, okay, action again, I guess. And then we get this fun meeting with the Riddler and Two-Face. So it feels like we should more just move from the Alfred and Robin heart to heart after Alfred's had his conversation with Bruce Wayne, where he's obviously kind of like in two minds, and then move just to the Riddler meeting Two-Face. So yeah, it always felt kind of like ill-fitting having this scene plonked right here. It does feel very plonked into the movie.
Yeah, it's kind of a meta commentary on the duality of how this movie feels. Not only the duality in this movie, maybe of what was originally intended with the duality between Batman and Bruce Wayne, Batman and Two-Face. This is also kind of a duality here of what Warner Brothers wanted and then the Schumacher cut of what was trying to be done here. Because, yeah, you plot this car chase randomly here after the death of the Graysons, and it's like, well, the energy, the pacing of the movie kind of is dying down. We're getting too serious. We need to just kind of plop in some action here. Yeah. It definitely feels we're kind of getting like a schizophrenic moment here of what you were feeling in the very first scene with the drive-through line. And it just kind of continues all throughout. And we continue to when, because Dick Grayson figures out that Bruce Wayne is Batman by doing his Grayson thing and swinging through the doors to see.
I do want to mention one thing just briefly before we get into so basically the kind of two things happening of Robin discovering who Batman is and also the Enigmatech thing kind of blowing up and the Riddlers. There's this kind of middle section of the movie. Not a lot happens. It's just basically like Robin does a lot of moaning. The Riddler becomes a super successful businessman overnight and can build a giant HQ in like 2 days. But anyway, I want to mention what I think might be the silliest thing in this movie. Now, there's a lot of silly things in this movie. You're thinking, Scott, we've already gone through the drive-through line, and we've mentioned the over-top performances of Tommy Lee Jones and the Riddler, and there's a whole lot of neon, and there's what could possibly be the silliest thing in this movie? Kung Fu laundry. I've always found Kung Fu laundry the silliest thing in this movie. I have seen this. I've thought about this on this most recent watch. That even though my favorite Batman movie is The Dark Knight, and this probably isn't even my favorite Batman movie of the original 4 Batman movies, modern Batman movies, but it's probably actually the Batman movie that I've seen the most times, and every time I always find this the silliest moment. Kung Fu Laundry.
And there are some deleted scenes, I think, either before or right after this scene of Dick kind of fighting with a couple of mannequins, and then Bruce Wayne comes in and kind of shows him how to accurately do it. So we kind of get that father-son or partnership between the two. But I would be lying if I said that when I saw that in theaters that I did not immediately go home and try that myself with my clothes. Because I love this scene. I think it's so cool. It shows us that, hey, he is kind of cool in Kung Fu, and he can do martial arts stuff with laundry. So, of course, I'm going to buy him being Robin here in a couple of minutes.
Also,
he's also kind of a jerk by what he does.
He is definitely a jerk. Did you ever question the fact that, like, before he does, like, his kind of gymnastic thing to get into the Batcave, so he's just in time to sneak through the door, just before he jumps over the stair banister, he says, "Now," and I'm always thought to myself, who is he saying that to? Is he just saying that to himself? Because that's kind of weird.
I did think it was weird too. It's kind of you were talking about James Bond or referencing James Bond. It's like in those spy movies when you have like the scientific device that copies like a cell phone or whatever, and it's working and it copies and the bad guy walks away, and then you turn your phone around and the screen is showing like copy enabled or copy successful. It's kind of like that. It's like, we don't need that, but it's just there to tell the audience that, hey, it worked, or hey, I'm going now. But yeah, it's like, now.
Oh, and one of the things that has always given me one of the biggest laughs in this movie is when Robin discovers the Batcave, goes off in a joyride in the Batmobile, and then Bruce is having a date with Chase Meridian.
Yep.
And Alfred calls him on his watch, modern technology, on his Apple Watch from
his Apple Watch in 1995.
1995 Apple Watch. And they have this conversation that's like a kind of full comedy routine, like a kind of who's on first, where he's like. He's like, oh no, I've got some bad news. Robin's taking the car. He's like, what? The Jaguar? No, the other car. What? The Bentley? No, the other car.
The other car. And I think I mentioned it the last recording, and I'll mention it now, that I could have taken another 40 minutes of him just listing off car names. And Michael Goff going, no, sir, the other car.
I could have taken several more minutes of this game of because we see his little car museum, this car, his garage stroke car museum that he's got, and just being like, what? The Volvo? No, the other car. What? The Rolls Royce? No.
The Oldsmobile. No, sir, the other. And it's the face that he makes at the end of it, where his thick, caterpillar-like eyebrows just go all the way down. It's just, It's a great moment. And then it kicks into a rock and roll song, and Dick Grayson is driving through the neon back alleyways of Gotham City.
We should mention that rock and roll song is Smash 'Em Up, which is the Offspring doing a cover of the original Damned song. So a great pop punk band covering another great punk band.
Yeah. And it's fair to mention that this movie has an amazing soundtrack. I think Kiss from a Rose won an Emmy. not an Emmy, but a Grammy.
A Grammy, I think. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
Oh, yeah. No, this has a great soundtrack.
yeah.
And like a weird soundtrack as well, because like the soundtrack, obviously it's got like the big numbers that everybody remembers from this movie is the song from the two end credit songs, like Seal's Kiss from a Rose, and I can never remember the exact order of how this goes, but the U2 song, Hold Me, Kiss Me, Kill Me, Thrill Me,
Yep.
however the order of that goes. That's the two songs everybody remembers. But like, this has like a weirdly hip soundtrack where it's got like people on it that you would not expect to be on the soundtrack of a mainstream movie, like PG Harvey and Nick Cave and The Flaming Lips and Sunny Day Real Estate, and you're like, and Method Man, and you're
Yeah,
you know,
it's pretty impressive, the collaboration and the compiling of all these different artists here. It's actually really cool.
yeah, it's one of those great '90s soundtracks.
Yeah,
Yeah.
but
The
Dick
weird
Grayson
thing
drives
is,
her.
like, even though I've written totally different notes, I watched this the other night there, because I lost my notes for the original recording, so I watched the movie the other night there and wrote totally different notes. And so all my notes for the movie are totally different. I don't remember writing this any time for the first recording, but the one line that I think I wrote exactly the same in the first recording that I wrote this time was Robin interrupts attempted rape by class of Newcomb High. I think in both times I wrote the exact same sentence.
I think I remember you saying that before too. Yeah, yeah, and I don't know. Yeah, it's an attempted rape, and the reward for him to do so is a kiss on the lips, which I was like, I don't know if I would be in the state of mind to want to do that after being
Yeah,
attempted
no,
raped, but
probably not. But
no,
this movie,
but we gotta give Dick Grayson the cool line of I could definitely get into this superhero gig.
yeah, because it's all about picking up chick. Yeah, this movie's attitude towards women is not. I mean, it's the '90s. I'm sorry. We apologize for being the '90s, and
Well, and I think you mentioned it the first recording that this movie is super horny.
Yes, I did like because like everybody like if you do something macho like women just follow you. It's a bit like the Three Musketeers recording, like
Exactly.
the
Yep.
Three Musketeers episode. It's the exact same thing. If you do anything macho, women will just automatically fall at your feet and want to kiss you and get you into bed and all this sort of stuff. Then that happens throughout the movie, and yes. And there is a moment like when the Riddler is demoing the box to Two-Face, where to get the attention to call over the women, he like kind of has like a kind of wavy hand sign towards Spice, which is acceptable. You can do that. You could. He just whistles at Sugar like she's a dog, and yet she responds to that and doesn't go
She
like,
comes over.
"What
That's
the
right.
fuck? Stop! Get the fuck
It's
away
so
from me,
you and
misogynistic
it's so
dick."
you. Yep.
Yeah, she's just like,
Yeah.
okay, I will just come and
I'll come
bring
over,
you
sure.
You know,
All
like,
I did today was interior decorate this one half of this apartment and
yeah.
cook this huge ass boar.
No,
Yep.
Spice cooked the huge ass boar. Sugar cooked something else that I can't actually
Oh,
remember.
that's right.
Oh yeah, that was the other thing. Like, I was like, it's amazing that Tommy, Two-Face kept his figure if he's eating 2 giant dinners every day, But that's another mystery for another time.
Yeah, maybe that's in the Schumacher cut. I don't know.
I
cannot confirm or deny that. But yeah, so Enigma and Two-Face, they go out, they start robbing, and they get super rich. As you said, Enigma is able to build his fortress and build his own empire, and we get to a releasing party of the new Enigmatech technology that is basically virtual reality, or it's basically 3D. For movie theaters, because that was a fun little piece of technology that we all remember. But here we get our next little.
I love that people have tried to since the 50s have tried to get 3D off the ground, and yet people are like, actually, we like it for a while, but we're not really that into it.
I just don't understand the appeal. It's like, well, things are jumping out at you. And I'm like, okay, but it's still 2D. It's not really there. I
don't know.
I will never understand.
I know. Like Hollywood tries to keep making it a thing. Like I say, it started. There was a small craze in the 50s. There was a small craze in the 80s, and then became big again around Avatar time, where every blockbuster had to be released in 3D for a couple of years, and then people were like, yeah, you know what? Like it was cool in Avatar, but like we don't actually give unless you actually film it in 3D, it just looks weird and it gives us a headache, and like we'd rather just watch a movie just as a movie. Thanks.
Exactly. But that's what Jim Carrey is that's what Nigma is doing here. He's releasing Nigmatech, and Bruce Wayne tests it out, and he gets his kind of brain copied onto a liquid USB drive, whatever they have there. I always wondered what that was. I'm like, that's an interesting floppy disk, I guess, would have been the terminology back then.
Yeah.
But I also, what stands out before the whole Batman, Two-Face, goons fight scenes, I loved how when Bruce Wayne is talking with Nigma and they're kind of trying to one-up each other, Nigma pulls out his glasses and starts mimicking everything that Bruce is doing. even whispers over to Drew Barrymore. He's like, "How's my mole?"
Yeah,
looks fine.
It's very funny. Yeah. It does feel like a very Ace Ventura move. That when he does that, like when he's doing the kind of mimicking. It's like, oh yeah, that feels very familiar.
But probably the thing I remember the most about this entire scene is the entrance of Batman from the glass roof, and he lands on this champagne-like structure. And as he's coming down, we zoom in on Chase Meridian, who is like, oh God, Batman again. But right behind her is one of the best extras I have ever seen in a movie. He points up and yells, "Batman! Ah!" And I will never forget this guy. Because, like, yes, of all the line readings, that one right there.
I love extras who make the most of their, like, if, extras who are, like, fiddling about in the background, or, if it's maybe just in a scene to like, die or something, and then it's like, you see them in the background of the scene still wriggling about 3 minutes later, or they just have, like, one line, but they're like, I'm going to make the most out of this one line. I love things like that.
It's one of my favorite moments of this movie. Is just that great little the extras going for it and is earning every single cent of that line reading.
Absolutely. Yeah. I would say, like, one of the most memorable, one of the things that I always remember as a kid, like with the Jim Carrey song, the dance number, is Jim Carrey's line right here, where he just looks to Tommy Lee Jones and he goes, your entrance was good, his was better. And it's just, I just always remember the way he says that, and like the kind of
it's also one of those moments too where, like how you were with Bruce Wayne in the circus, of Bruce Wayne doing all the kung fu with all the henchmen, Nigma's over there just talking with Two-Face, the guy who's holding up this entire party, just chatting. Is anyone else looking over there like, hey, do you think they're kind of in cahoots? Because he's not holding a gun to him,
Oh, dear. Yeah, I know. It's one of those kind of, like, moments where you're like, what? Is everybody blind? There's like a...
Guys, let's turn around. Let's stop pointing at Batman and going,
Hey, it's Batman! Let's watch Batman fighting. Let's not pay attention to the conversation that the new rich businessman on town is talking to the main villain around these parts. Let's not pay attention to that at all. Let's just look at Batman.
Yeah.
And while looking at Batman, there is also a fun moment in this fight sequence that I always enjoyed, where they do like a little kind of Indiana Jones moment, where you've
Yep.
got this one goon who's like really skillful with like nunchucks and stuff, and is doing all these like cool moves, and then Batman just kicks him in the face.
Is that beat did that start with Raiders of the Lost Ark? Because you mentioned Three Musketeers. That movie had that moment with Porthos the pirate on the ship, and it happened here, and it's happened in so many other action movies.
I don't
Did
know.
it
Like
start
the
with
first
Raiders?
time I ever, yeah, I mean, obviously Raiders is 81, I want to say.
81,
Uh,
I want to say, yeah.
so yeah, I believe that Raiders is the first one that like started that as like a trend of like the guy with the swords, and then like Indiana Jones just pulls out his gun and shoots him,
Yeah.
and yeah, I think that was what started it, and then like
Okay.
loads of action movies since then has imitated that beat because it's a fantastic beat and it gets a laugh every time. Like I laughed about it here, I laughed about it in Three Musketeers. Like if I see it in any other movie,
It's going to get a laugh. Yep.
yeah, exactly. It's a great gag.
It's not improvised, but it was not supposed to happen because Harrison Ford, the day of shooting that scene, was supposed to do an action piece, but I don't know if he had food poisoning or the flu or something.
Yeah,
He just
yeah,
couldn't
he
do
was
it.
ill.
And then he's
Yeah,
just
he
like,
was
let me
ill,
just
so
shoot.
they had to like, yeah, he had to do that on the fly. It's just, it's amazing that something that has been, kind of ripped off so many times and has become so iconic, and is one of the most iconic moments in any of the Indiana Jones films, and
Mhm.
probably just cinema. It was just like an accident of like, yeah, he was ill that day, he couldn't do a full action sequence. So they were just like, what can we do instead? Oh, this would be a fun guy.
Yeah, absolutely. And Batman jumps out of the building to go after Two-Face and gets down into like a little construction site where they're working on the roads. And again, Schumacher cut issue here. A lot of the Two-Face lines are cut. Again, a lot of monologues and a lot of soliloquies that Two-Face is having. But he gets buried under sand. And this is our first appearance of Dick Grayson performing as Robin, and comes in and saves Bruce and saves Batman. And then we have our fun little chat with them in the Batcave of like, hey, so what are you going to call me? Batboy, Nightwing? What's a fun superhero name? And I remember hearing the Nightwing name and going like, yeah, call him Nightwing because Nightwing's cool. Love Nightwing.
He has to be Robin first.
That's true.
It's the order it goes in. Yeah. So, and again, like, there's a moment like when he flies into the tube, and there's also a moment with the kind of flame retardant cape, where you get like this bad CGI, and you're like ugh, but then you immediately forgive the movie for that because you have this cool moment of like Batman emerging from the flames, and you're like, yeah.
That is one of probably the biggest fist pump, fist in the air moment. The Goldenthal theme kicks in and he runs out from the flame, and you're like, yeah, that's Batman.
Yeah, exactly. And I immediately, every time I see that sequence, I immediately forgive the ropey CG because I'm like, that's cool. That's cool. I'm gonna give you a pass, movie, because you gave me that sequence, so I'm all good.
Yep, absolutely.
Yeah, and then like again we get into one of the kind of lulls of the movie, where we get like kind of some arguments between Bruce and Dick over whether they should be partners or not, and we get some back and forth with Batman and Chase, and Chase realizing that she actually loves Bruce, and
and also Bruce with Alfred, because Bruce is saying, no, Dick, you're not going to do this, and Dick's saying, I'm going to do this whether you want me to or not. And I love this, the sequence with Bruce and Alfred, of Bruce saying, you're encouraging him. And Alfred giving just one of my favorite lines of the movie is like, men with a mind with revenge need little encouragement. They need guidance. Yeah. And that is such important to the whole Batman lore. That's kind of why Batman exists. It's to give a kind of like a compass to vengeance and to self-justice, I guess. And that's what we're kind of moving in with Dick, and that's what Alfred did with Bruce, kind of helping him with this whole Batman project. And there's this whole Schumacher cut scene in here too, where he's watching TV and the news is saying all of these crazy people over the last several years have popped up all because of Batman. So if Batman was to go away, all Two-Face, Riddler, Penguin, Catwoman, they wouldn't exist. So this all starts the whole kind of him making the decision of calling it quits with Batman and just being Bruce Wayne.
Yeah, for sure. And I think a lot of the, so I suppose like a lot of the kind of more grounded stuff doesn't entirely work for me.
Okay.
What for a couple of reasons, I think. I mean, I see where they're going for it, and the grounded stuff works for me in the sense of like I get the essence of what they're trying to do, and I keep seeing what they're trying to do and being like admiring what they're trying to do. However, I think the drawbacks of that are basically one, while this movie is a lot of fun and it looks great. I think like the neon visuals are cool, and I think that the action sequences are really well done, and I think there's some real stuff to admire about this movie from the production design point, from the music point, from the action kind of point of view, stuff like that. However, I would say the script is terrible. Or, I know that, it's not always the people who are credited as screenwriters. Like, I know it's script doctoring, there's people probably tinkering with the script, so, like, who knows what the original script or whatever is. I think the script is not good. And also, I think that Val Kilmer has great chemistry with Michael Goff. He bounces off him real well. However, I don't think Val Kilmer has particularly good chemistry with either Chris O'Donnell or Nicole Kidman. I don't know if you view it differently, but I'm not. Yeah, they don't mesh brilliantly. And I mean, I've seen like Val Kilmer have amazing sexual chemistry with other kind of female co-leads or like love interest type characters. Like even this is kind of out chronologically, but you've got to remember most of the episodes were recorded in August, and this is now November. So the Saint, which will come out in a few weeks, he's got great sexual chemistry with Elizabeth Shue in that movie, but I don't think they have, or I think their chemistry is pretty good in the opening sequences, but when they try to do the like serious turn in the relationship, it just comes off as kind of bland.
I think I buy his chemistry with Chase more as Batman than Bruce Wayne. Like when he's Batman, I feel it.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And I would agree that the chemistry between Val Kilmer and Chris O'Donnell is not 100% there. I think really it for me is that Chris O'Donnell is just he's not a kid, and that's what Batman does. He sees like the lost young kid's soul because that's who he was. He's an orphan, so he looks for those young people who have a mind for vengeance or is angry at the world and tries to give them guidance. But here it's just like he's an adult. You don't need to do that. Not your responsibility. But yeah, I can see where you're coming from with their chemistry. But I definitely, because even when they have their last kiss, him as Batman and Chase, waiting naked in her bed because she scheduled the midnight rendezvous.
I'm feeling beforehand.
Right. She's scheduling it for midnight and she falls asleep. I'm like, oh, of course, why not? Typical.
Typical.
You've already been married for 10 years.
Yeah. No, it's interesting that because, like you say, I would probably agree with that, and particularly in those opening exchanges in like the first half hour of the movie where Batman and like Chase have like a totally different relationship and they're doing the zingy line thing before everything becomes broody. Like I think that works kind of well enough. But yeah, with what's supposed to be the heart of the movie, like the Bruce Chase relationship, yeah, the chemistry, it's flat. It's very, very flat. It doesn't feel like these people like connecting, these kind of troubled people that like she's kind of this person who's attracted to dangerous dark men, and like she wants something different even though she's actually getting a dangerous dark man. And then he's struggling and he wants to find, they're both people like trying to find like real love, and they've just always had these kind of fiery passionate affairs or whatever. And like that's fine, and I get that, and like that's kind of a good central core idea of having that as the kind of heart of your story. But it just, when you actually see it on screen, it just comes off as kind of dull.
And I think it's because it feels like they're both brooding. You know, obviously Bruce is brooding because he's having the flashbacks of his parents' death and the red journal on his dad's desk. But it also feels like Chase is brooding for some reason. And of course, we never find out because we don't dive into her character at all.
She is an incredibly thinly sketched character that we don't really seem to care about, actually.
But it does feel like they're both brooding in some way. So it kind of just, those scenes where they're together on Halloween night when Bruce is going to tell her who he really is and that he is Batman. They're just kind of sitting there talking very softly and talking very seriously with truths and secrets that they need to tell. Kind of just feels off. But him as Batman with Chase, it's the anatomically correct suit is why it's happening. She sees the nipples on him and she's like, "Yep, I'm in. Give that to me.
That's my man." Yeah. But anyway, this love-in is obviously interrupted by action. We gotta have more action in this movie. So the Riddler and Two-Face pretend to be children trick-or-treating, which manages to fool Alfred, which Alfred has generally shown more intelligence in the movies, all three movies up to this point, than this scene. So, like, I always feel disappointed by Alfred in this scene. I'm like, really? Really? You really bought them with, like, their little masks, like, standing on their knees? Come on, Alfred. You're better than this.
Well, I also feel bad. I remember watching it in the theaters and going, "Oh my God, did they just kill Alfred?" Because he's an old, fragile man, and they clock him like on the shoulder and the neck. I'm like, "Oh my God, is he okay? Did he break a hip falling over? Oh God!" But it is also fair. They go over to
kids listening at home. He's okay.
Yes, he is fine. But they go over to Wayne Manor because the little liquid USB port from the party. They find out that Bruce Wayne is actually Batman. Even though the only proof that they have is a giant flying bat on a screen, and they connect the dots like, oh, hey, he's a rich guy thinking about bats, so he must be Batman, which makes sense.
And they have...
But they show up and they start shooting up the place, and the Riddler, Jim Carrey, he does his Jim Carrey thing, and one of my favorite scenes, or at least the ones that are very memorable for me, is him destroying the Batcave with the pitching of the bat bombs and talking about the nature documentary and throwing the whole bag of bombs in the Batmobile. I love this scene. I don't know. It's you know what, Jim, you do you, and just go, and we'll film it.
I also love this sequence, and again, it's also one of the sequences that always stood out in my head. And much like I loved the comedy electrocution sound effects we got at the start of the movie, I love the squeaky toy sound effects we get as he's throwing the bombs about in this sequence. We
get the baseball theme. We get the like yes. Yes. I think he has an Ace Ventura line in here when he opens the door behind the cabinet and he's like, "Spank me."
That is true.
You're right there.
Jim Phil, and when he thrusts and says "Joygasm," it's genuinely delightful.
Which I didn't know what that was as a kid.
No, when I first saw it, I was like, oh.
Hey, Dad, what does he mean by that? But Bruce Wayne, he gets shot by Two-Face. At first, I think in the last first recording, you thought he got shot in the head. Was that correct?
I can't remember. Like watching it again, yeah. Like he has like a cut in the head, but like watching it again, it looks like he might have got shot in the shoulder, but then it looks like it's a head.
Yeah, that's what I always thought. He got shot like in the shoulder or the arm or something, and then he fell down, and then that cut from his head came from his fall down the many stairs of Wayne Manor.
The grand staircase he's got. Yeah.
And the movie could have easily ended there because Two-Face holds the gun to his head to finish it, and Nigma says, "No, if you kill him, you won't learn nothing." Which, to this day, I don't know what that means.
But I'm not sure the movie knows what that means. It's
yes,
just,
exactly.
Again,
exactly.
It's one of those classic kind of like, like you get these this again. We're going to mention Bond again. You get these moments in Bond all the time where the villain has the perfect opportunity just to like kill Bond stone dead, but then is like, no. I will first of all tell you my elaborate plan, and then I will leave you alone with one guard to also die in an equally elaborate way from an elaborate trap that I created myself. And I'm sure when I walk away from this trap, having told you the entirety of my elaborate plan, then nothing will go wrong from this point forth.
Exactly. And hell, even to stay on the Batman Schumacher train here, if we go to Batman and Robin that I just watched a couple of weeks ago for my channel, if you watch the opening scene and the rocket that shoots up, if you remember, Freeze apprehends Batman and freezes his arms to the side of the rocket, only to tell Batman that, hey, at 30,000 feet, your heart's gonna freeze and you will be no more. And I'm watching it thinking, why don't you just freeze him? And then he'll be no more right there. You don't have to shoot him up into a rocket. You have him. He's not moving. Oh, villains in 90s. Aren't they great? Just villains in the 90s.
Oh man, I love it. I love a good monologue. I love a great villain monologue. We've got two villains here, and both do fun monologues.
Do we have two villains here? Because I feel like Tommy Lee Jones as Two-Face is forgotten once Riddler is introduced. It's like, you're there.
I think we do have two villains. We don't have two villains concurrent. Is what we have. Because basically, I think the bazooka, like when the car chase thing, where he fires the bazooka at him, I think that happens around the 50-minute mark. So for basically the first half of the movie, Two-Face is the villain of the film. The villain that's making an impression. Like, we're getting the Riddler origin story, and he's kind of creating his villain identity, but he's not the main, he's not a villain that we're kind of concerned about. He's just like an obsessive stalker for the first half of the movie. Like, he's not like the villain. Whereas, basically, Two-Face gets relegated to being like essentially the Riddler's cohort. But Two-Face is the villain of the first half of the movie, and the Riddler is the main villain of the second half of the movie.
Yeah. Okay. Just there for Robin to kind of beat up at the end a little bit. Not to end Two-Face, but to beat him up for a little bit.
Yeah.
But so he comes to, and Alfred's okay, and they've been getting all these riddles throughout the film, and kind of puts them all together and figures out that, all these riddles have numbers, and if you use the numbers on the alphabet, it'll give you the acronym of Mr. Enigma.
Yeah, the way they get around this is ridiculous. So it's like, what? It's just numbers. We were related to the numbers in the alphabet, and then and like going, the numbers in the alphabet don't work, but like, what if we conjoin some of the numbers from some of the clues, and then 18 and this and then that, and it's like, what? The logical leaps you are taking, as in,
Yep.
whatever, man. Yeah, all right, Mr. E, like, get on with it.
Mr. Enigma, hello. If you remember the 1966 Batman the movie film,
I do.
when they were figuring out, okay, who are all the villains that we're going up against? And it's the same logic pulling in this scene too, whereas in that movie it was like, it's actually pretty fishy what happened to me out there on the ocean. Fishy like a penguin. And then Robin's like, well, it happened at sea. Sea for Catwoman. Oh, God, that just leaves us with a sinister riddle. Riddler? It's the same thing, and I love it.
Genuinely, there's, I love a good comedy, and the scene in Batman the movie, this 1966 one, where, like, he's running around with that bomb, and he says, some days you just can't get rid of a bomb. It's just, like, when he keeps running into things like a nun, or like, somebody with a pram, like a lady with a pram with a baby and stuff like that. It's genuinely one of the things I think is funniest in all of cinema. It's one of my favorite scenes of all time. It makes me laugh uproariously every time I watch it. It never gets old.
It's that Chaplin, Abbott and Costello, just comedy timing right there, and it continues on to the 90s, and I love it.
Adam West's comedy timing in that scene is majestic. It's really amazing. Oh dear. Yeah.
Now before we get to the
big finale,
the ending battle, there is a huge deleted scene from the Schumacher cut. Probably what the Schumacher pictures and tweets and everything online covers the most is this deleted scene with this big giant mechanical bat. And throughout this movie, ever since the death of the Graysons, we have seen Bruce kind of do flashbacks of this red journal on his father's desks of the day of their funeral. And he took the book and he ran through the rain and the storm and fell into this big giant cave that would later on become the Bat Cave. Well, after they discover that, it's Mr. Enigma, Edward Nigma, they go down to the Bat Cave, and before he puts on the sonar suit, Alfred says, well, there's something through that corridor that you need to confront. You need to confront who you are and what your destiny is. So Bruce Wayne goes through, and he is looking around, and he sees the red book that he had lost and forgot about down there, and he reads the last entry of his father's journal, and the entry reads that Bruce is begging him to go see the next Zorro movie or whatever, going to go see the movies tonight with my son Bruce. So it's him realizing that, I'm the reason that my parents are dead, basically, because I told them to go out that night. And it's him realizing that he is the reason why he is who he is, and his destiny is his own. It's not anyone else's. And from out of nowhere, this big, giant mechanical bat, which if you watch the deleted scenes, I'm going to be honest, looks pretty terrible, but I'm sure would have maybe have been fixed with post-visual effects, post-production. But then after that, he emerges from the cave, meets up with Alfred, and says, Alfred, I'm Batman. And that's when he puts on the sonar suit. A scene that I would be really interested in seeing done with the Goldsmith music underneath it, and just to see play out beautifully. But if you watch it just as the deleted scenes on YouTube or wherever you watch it, it doesn't pack the same punch, but I wish we would see it play out throughout the film. But it's really like the biggest Schumacher cut thing that was cut from this movie.
Well, it'd definitely be interesting to see, fully restored 4K or whatever,
Yeah.
Yeah, that'd be cool. But unfortunately, we don't have that.
We don't have that. We don't have that yet. But if people push like they did for the Snyder Cut, maybe eventually we will see a a fully restored Schumacher cut here in the next couple of years. So who knows?
Yeah, you never know what can happen.
And
Yeah,
companies love making money, so if they can make money from it, why not?
that's very true.
Yeah,
So it could happen. It could happen.
yeah.
Um,
But then we get Robin showing up, which again is always something that I love seeing. We get the actual Robin rubber suit with the gauntlets on his arms, and them hanging out and figuring out, okay, who's going to go by air and who's going to go by sea, and take out Edward Nygma and Two-Face playing Battleship.
yeah, and before we get Riddler and Two-Face playing Battleship and trying to blow up Robin's bat boat, we get Batman flying across the Gotham night sky and then giving the iconic thumbs up, which is the most gift moment from any Batman movie ever made, I think.
Hey, go. I realized it in my watch along of Batman and Robin that'll be coming out in a couple of weeks on my channel, so if people want to check that out. But I realized just this year of how shitty this Commissioner Gordon is. He really sucks. He doesn't do anything. He stands there and is like, yes, you go do the thing. I'll be here.
to the extent, like, because I'd watched like the I'd watched like the show from the 60s, and like I'd watched these movies, and then like I almost found Gary Oldman's Commissioner Gordon like jarring, because I was like, he was almost too proactive. I was just like, oh yeah, but the police don't do anything in Gotham, do they? Like,
I think that's what made like the Dark Knight trilogy so awesome. Is like, oh hey, the cops are actually trying to do things.
Oh,
interesting.
They actually do try to solve crime in these movies. That's weird.
There's a moment in Batman and Robin when Batman says, hey, you have 11 minutes to thaw these people, and then they run after Mr. Freeze, and Commissioner Gordon is standing there talking with Poison Ivy like, hey, you just met one of the most sinister men in Gotham, and then slowly walks away. Like, dude, you suck. No wonder why Batman and Robin exist.
Yeah. I was wondering, like, maybe it's just like a difference in like the times, or I suppose like with comic book movies now, I'm particularly primed with like the MCU and stuff like that, whereas like everything, like the final act of the movie, the final battle of the movie takes like at least half an hour or whatever, and so like, yeah, it's weird in this movie. It kind of, the final confrontation, from the moment they go after and have like the battle on sea and air, and then we get to the final confrontation where like Robin and Chase have been captured, and like Batman has to get them, and all that kind of stuff. It all seems to happen very quickly. Like it almost kind of rushed. And I wasn't sure if that's just like because I've been primed by the comic book movies and I was working by today's standard, or if it just genuinely is kind of like a kind of rushed finale.
I think there may have been, or at least it feels like there may have been a mandate by Warner Brothers to be like, oh, if we're doing an action movie, it needs to be 2 hours long. It needs to be either under 2 hours or just over it. We cannot go over, because we need to have a lot of repeat ability in movie theaters. And if it's over 2 hours, we're not going to make our money back.
Yeah, and this movie is like, for people who maybe don't remember, this movie is 2 hours 1 minute with credits. Without credits, it's about an hour and 57.
Yeah, so I think with that mandate, and it gets into post-production and the editing room, we're just like, okay, well, we have the story, and now we're in our final battle. Let's just kind of hit all of the big points, and that's it. Because, yeah, this final battle, it's 10 minutes, I wanted to say? About?
Roughly, yeah. It goes by very quickly, because like I'm always surprised by how little is left in the movie when we get to this point, where you think like as they set off by sea and by air, we're gonna have at least another I don't know, 25 minutes, something like that, for this kind of big final confrontation. But yeah, it's like 10, 15 minutes. It's just like, oh, okay.
It all goes by quick. Robin finally confronts Two-Face after killing his family, and that lasts like a minute, and he's apprehended very quickly and very easily, which always drove me crazy as a kid, because Robin is awesome, and you're making him look like an idiot. And then we have the choice. We have the famous choice beat in superhero films, where the villain makes the main character or protagonist choose between one life and the other. Again, kind of building on the duality of who Batman is. Do you save the love of Bruce's life or Batman's brand new junior partner? I always like this sequence when Bruce jumps down to save both of them. The visual effects here, though, when he throws the Batarang and all the brain waves are leaving Jim Carrey's head, and the thing is like moving from side to side as if it's like flubber or whatever. It looks terrible, but I do love the diving scene where he goes after both Robin and Chase, and like, yep, that's what Batman would do. He would save both. He wouldn't save just one.
Absolutely. I think my favorite beat in this sequence, and the thing I always loved most about it, was actually, because I just thought it was cool, I think it's a great fist pump moment, is when Jim Carrey mocks the simplicity of Batman's riddle, where he's kind of like, because he's thinking that he's like way more intelligent than Batman. He's been having all, sucking all these brainwaves and like draining people's IQs and stuff like that, and gaining to his own IQ. So he thinks he's become a god, and Batman gives him this riddle where the obvious answer is a bat, and he just kind of he sits back in his seat and he laughs and he's like, ha 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 ha! Of course it's a bat, you idiot. It's simple, it's so easy. Why don't you make it harder, kind of thing. And then Batman just goes, exactly, and turns on the sonar and like makes everything dark, and like the Riddler, that moment when the Riddler knows that he's fucked is beautiful.
It's really good. And again, Two-Face is kind of just standing in the back.
Yeah, he's
like
just
the main
a set
henchman
at this point.
Yeah. It's all Enigma here, who has the Ace Ventura hair too. The costume.
He does.
Yep.
Very popular hairstyle in 1995.
Sure.
Well, popular for Jim Carrey because he uses it in Ace Ventura, When Nature Calls, and this movie.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. And then after Chase and Robin are saved, Two-Face confronts them, and Batman tricks him with a whole bunch of coins when Two-Face flips it, which I think is a brilliant move. I think it's actually, we see that in the animated series in one of those episodes. Mm-hmm. And I mean, if we look at it, Batman basically kills Two-Face.
Yeah, I don't entirely believe that. Even as a kid, because basically I even as a kid didn't believe that Two-Face died here. I always assumed that Two-Face probably pop up in some other film. Basically, I think I was burnt very early on in childhood with comic books in terms of Superman died when I was about 7, and I remember it making news. I remember it being the death of Superman in the comics. Oh my God, Superman is dead. He came back 6 months later with a mullet, and I was and then from that moment on, I just didn't believe anybody died in comic books. That is what burnt me. That was because I was genuinely distraught by what? They've killed off Superman? Because I don't know, I think it was 93, so I was 7 at the time or whatever, so I was and from that moment on, I was people don't die in comic books. So that's what made me cynical. And so I was nah, it's fine. He'd probably come back.
Okay, cool. I think after watching Batman '89 and I always thought that the Joker was dead, so I was used to these characters dying. And hell, even with Batman Returns, we see Christopher Walken and Danny DeVito's Penguin flat out die in the movie. So I was used to it.
Yeah, I suppose
I
like
just,
I always
I just
assume that
really,
major characters can come back. I'd be like,
okay.
like I believe in the deaths of like, Christopher Walken's character or whatever. But I was like, yeah, Penguin could come back probably.
I always felt bad for, I'm a big, I know you're not a fan, but I'm a big fan of the Batman v Superman and the
Mhm,
Justice League,
mhm.
the Ben Affleck version of Batman. But I always felt bad about everyone saying like, "Oh, he's killing people," and I'm like, guys, Batman has been killing people in movies going back to Michael Keaton. I mean, it's nothing new. And here in Batman Forever, I always took it as, yeah, he kind of just killed Two-Face here. So, I mean, come on, it's not nothing new. See here.
Yeah, like I suppose, yeah.
I mean, even in the Dark Knight trilogy,
Hmm.
he killed every major villain in each movie.
That's true. That's true. Yeah, I suppose like yeah. I think there's just like a difference. Like there you can portray a hero killing people in a kind of heroic way that is like defending people or like either by accident or like defending people. And then like I suppose people were found it problematic, or I found it problematic, or maybe other people found it problematic in that way of like there's a difference of like portraying a hero character, which broadly um, Batman is supposed to be, even though he's a kind of anti-hero. He's always treading that line. So you have
Sure.
like what is an anti-hero and what is a psychotic vigilante. And like you have like these anti-hero characters, and you're like, okay, you might be like, oh, but their actions come from a kind of noble place, but I think like Batfleck stepped into too close to that kind of like, oh, he's just like fucking Cobra now, like he's just like a psychotic vigilante, and like yeah, like pushing it too much into that territory just kind of I
Yeah.
don't know. Doesn't work for
Sure.
me. But that's a conversation for another time, I think.
Sure. When you do the 2010s podcast, action podcast, we'll talk about it then. I get
Yeah,
where you're
yeah,
coming from though, so I'm not
yeah.
gonna default you. I totally I see it a different way, but that movie is so divisive that we'll table that for another time. Um,
Indeed, we
and we
shall.
can move on to the ending of Batman Forever when Chase goes to Arkham Asylum, where Nigma is there in his own little cell. Which I forgot to mention that in the Schumacher cut, his cut actually began at Arkham Asylum with the escaping of Two-Face, and on the wall it read, "The Batman must die," and that's when we cut to Wayne Tower with Bruce Wayne and Edward Nigma. Here, she's asking him, so, hey, do you know who's Batman? And Jim Carrey, in the Jim Carrey-ish way, in his little jailhouse getup, says, I'm Batman. And Chase looks at Bruce and says, well, your secret's safe with me. Don't work too late.
And they all lived happily ever after, even though
Now,
she was never seen again.
yeah.
Um,
Now this cut ends with Batman and Robin running in front of the bat signal, which I loved growing
uh,
up because it's silhouette. Again, you give me silhouettes and I'm instantly in love. But the Schumacher ending that was originally scheduled or that was originally shot was Alfred driving Chase home and Chase asking Alfred, so Alfred, does this ever end? And Alfred says, no, madam, not in this lifetime. And then the
mm,
camera slowly pans up as if it was the end of Batman 89 through all the scaffolding of Gotham to where we see Batman and Robin standing on a gargoyle overlooking the city. And I always pictured that Danny Elfman score at the end of Batman 89 playing during that.
mm.
And that's how the Schumacher cut was supposed to end. I
Oh,
like them both,
I like
but
them both.
I
Yeah.
would really love to have seen the gargoyle Schumacher cut scene.
And maybe one day we will.
Maybe one day.
The last thing I'm going to mention before we go on to the kind of social media promotion segment of the podcast as we round up. Is like there's a nice little in-joke here at the end that obviously I didn't pick up on as a kid, but obviously as an adult picked up on, where the psychiatrist is a character called Dr. Burton, which is obviously styled after Tim Burton, as the actor playing Dr. Burton, Rennie Auberjonois, who is probably most famous to Star Trek fans as Odo from Star Trek DS9.
Yeah.
He's got basically Tim Burton's exact haircut, or hair stylings, you might want to call them. And yes, so that's like a little fun in joke to kind of right at the end of the movie, right there. I thought I'd flag that up.
Mr. Burton, who, you didn't want to do a third Batman movie.
No, but he did produce it.
You didn't want to do it.
He didn't want to direct it, but he did produce it, so he's still getting a cut of that money.
He had that meeting with the executives, and I think he had the intentions of doing it, but then the executives were like, you don't want to do this.
No.
You want to do something else. You just go do it.
We'll just give you a producer credit. Yeah.
But that's Batman forever. Batman.
Anyway,
my favorite.
That's the end of this episode. Caleb, do you want to promote your channel before we say goodbye to the audience?
Absolutely. If you liked my insight and my telling of the Schumacher isms that were supposed to have been in this movie, go over to my YouTube channel called Caleb Watches Movies. Try to make it as simple as possible. Give me a like and subscribe on my channel, please. And also keep a lookout for my watch-along of Batman and Robin that is coming out on December 23rd, just before Christmas. Thought for my 500th episode, why not? Let's continue the Schumacher universe and let's go back and watch a movie I had not seen since the good Batman movies, Batman Begins, came out. So it was a fun time revisiting the Schwarzeneggerisms and the Clooniness of Batman for Batman and Robin. So head on over and please subscribe.
Jesus Christ. Between that and Jingle All the Way, that is one of Schwarzenegger's worst years. 97,
yes,
not a year to remember for Schwarzenegger. So if you like what you heard here, you can listen to loads more of it. All 90s action all the time. We're on Anchor, we're on Spotify, we're on Apple Podcasts. We're on a bunch of other platforms. And if you really like us, you can give us a review, and you can rate us. And if you do rate us, can you please rate us 5 stars? Because otherwise the algorithm thinks we're shit. So that's the way the world works, apparently. And if you want to hit us up with some comments, you also can. You can just head on over to Twitter, type in @90saction, and you will see us, and you can comment. Give us any comments. You can also send comments my way if you want, @ScottMurphy85 on Twitter. And yeah, that's all for this time. I hope you enjoyed this recut, re-recorded, take 2 episode of Batman Forever. And take 1, unfortunately, you will never hear. But that's all for this time. Please do join us again next week when we will be talking about the ghost and the darkness. Until then, though, see ya.